Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Elliot Vaughan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. For a brief moment, he wondered if he'd misheard his wife. Sloane had just casually mentioned that she was going out to dinner with a co-worker. Her tone was so indifferent, it could have been about something as trivial as a work email or the unpredictable weather. Slowly, he looked up at her, watching carefully. Sloane, as always, seemed completely at ease. She was cutting small pieces of steak, her movements deliberate and calm. But Elliot knew her too well. He could tell when she was hiding something and, more importantly, when she was testing him. He waited, expecting maybe a laugh, an admission that she was joking, or perhaps an emotional reaction from her. But nothing came. She just kept eating, as though it was no big deal that her husband was now looking at her like he was piecing together a mystery. The air in the dining room seemed to thicken. Elliot set his fork down and leaned on the table, studying her every movement. He noticed Sloane wasn't meeting his eyes. That wasn't like her. She always maintained eye contact, especially when she was trying to prove something. But tonight, she kept her gaze elsewhere, focusing too intently on her own plate. A co-worker, he repeated, keeping his voice steady and neutral. Yes, she responded, lifting her wine glass casually. Just an informal dinner. Her calmness was what bothered him most. There was no hesitation, not a hint of guilt or doubt in her words. The answer came too smoothly, too rehearsed. Elliot interlaced his fingers on the table. He wasn't naive. He knew that marriages went through phases and that sometimes the desire for something new could creep in. But this wasn't about desire. It was about something more, he realized. The Sloane had presented him with this information without him asking. It was a test, and he needed to understand the game before making his next move. So this doesn't change anything between us? He asked, keeping his tone controlled. Sloane finally looked up at him, her smile making something twist in his gut. Of course not, she said, her voice almost affectionate. You know I love you. For a moment, Elliot felt the urge to laugh. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, feeling a lump tighten in his throat. He could react in several ways, demand an explanation, get angry, confront her directly. But if he did that, he'd be doing exactly what Sloane expected. So he chose something different. He smiled, a light, casual smile, the kind you give when someone tells a joke that isn't funny. Then, as naturally as possible, he said, maybe I should go out with someone too. There's a woman at the gym, Tessa. I think she'd be up for it. The silence that followed was the true turning point of the conversation. Sloane blinked, as if struck by an invisible blow. Elliot saw the slight change in her posture. Her relaxed shoulders stiffened, and her grip on the fork tightened. She hadn't seen this coming. This was her game, and Elliot had just picked up the pieces and flipped the board. Oh really? Her voice came out a little lower, lacking the confidence it had held just moments before. Elliot kept his composure. Yeah, he said, picking up his wine glass and swirling the liquid. Maybe I'll give it a try too. That's when he saw it. The change in her expression was almost imperceptible, but he was watching too closely to miss it. For just a second, the color drained from Sloane's face, and her lips pressed together in an involuntary reaction. It was all the confirmation he needed. If this dinner with a co-worker truly meant nothing to Sloane, if she believed it wouldn't affect their marriage, then why did the mere mention of another woman unsettle her so much? Because she wanted control. She wanted to be the one in charge, the one who decided what happened. But Elliot had just proven that she no longer had that power over him. He didn't say anything else. He just went back to eating, as though nothing had changed. But in that moment, he knew that the rules of the game had shifted. From that night on, silence took on a new presence in their home, a silence that wasn't comfortable or shared. It was tense, sharp, and heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts and emotions neither of them were ready to confront. Sloane tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but she knew something had changed. Elliot hadn't argued, hadn't demanded answers, hadn't created the scene she had been expecting. Instead, he had embraced her challenge with a casualness that had completely unsettled her now. As she watched him sitting on the couch, casually, fiddling with his phone and wearing a faint smile, Sloane couldn't help but feel that something was different. Ever since that dinner, Elliot seemed like a different person. His habits were unchanged, but there was something about the way he carried himself, now a lightness, like a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He still left for work early, came home at the same time, but his presence was different. His gaze didn't hold the same intensity when he looked at her, and that, more than anything, made her uneasy. That's when she began to notice the small details. Elliot was putting more effort into his appearance, his work, and even his conversations. There was a new ease about him that she hadn't seen before. It was as if the weight of their marriage, the tension, the unspoken expectations, had suddenly vanished, and that terrified her. Shoulders he left for work early in feminine came. Back at the same time, a Selways, but there was something different about the way he cared himself. His gaze no longer held the same intensity. When he looked at her, and that more than anything else made her uneasy, that's when she started noticing little details. Elliot was putting more effort into his appearance, nothing flashy but enough for Samoan who knew him so well to pick upon. He spent more time choosing which shirt to wear, fixed his hair more carefully before leaving, and above all seemed more distant. His phone, which he said to be left lying around the house, was now always with him, and it vibrated more often than she liked. Sloane didn't like that one bit. She tried to ignore it, told herself she didn't care after all. She was the one who opened this door. She wasted one who came up with the idea in the first place, but now she found herself on the edge of a cliff. She hadn't anticipated when she decided to play with fire. Friday night was approaching, and the tension in her chest grew by the hour. She didn't understand she felt that way at the start of week. She'd been sure she was in control, but now for the first time she felt that control slipping through her fingers. Then came the final blow, while they were making dinner. On Thursday night, Elliot broke the silence at tomorrow. I'm going out. Sloane, who washed sopping vegetables on the cutting board, felt her hand falter for a second. She forced herself to keep moving without looking up. Oh really? Yeah, he answered without rushing. Not caring to add any details, she waited for him to say more, but all she heard was the sound of the knife on the cutting board and the low sizzle of oil heating in the pan. Her chest tightened. She didn't want to ask, didn't want to seem curious, but she couldn't help herself. Any specific plans? Elliot wiped his hands on a dish towel, then turned and leaned against the counter. He looked at her for a moment before answering, and when he finally spoke, it was with a disconcerting calm. I'm going out with Tessa. The knife stopped. All the air seemed to leave the kitchen. Sloane blinked a few times, processing what had just said. Her stomach twisted, her heart started pounding in a way she didn't want to admit, but she took a deep breath, set the knife aside, and turned to him with a practiced smile. That's good. Have fun. Elliot held her gaze for a moment, like he was waiting for a reaction beyond. But when he realized shouldn't give him the satisfaction, he just nodded, picked up his plate, and went to the dining room. Only when she was alone in the kitchen did she allow her expression to change. Sloane slumped against the counter, feeling her legs weakened. Her fingers gripped the edge of marble as she tried to steady her breathing. She wanted to ignore what she was feeling, but she couldn't. The truth was undeniable, cruel, devastating. The thought of Elliot with another woman was eating her up inside it. Next day, Sloane spent the entire day restless. She tried focusing on work and swearing emails, booking meetings, but the thoughts kept circling back to the same question: was Elliot really going out with Tessa? She wanted to believe he was bluffing, just responding to her own move. But something inside her, something unslinging and persistent, told her Hugh and Elliot wasn't the kind of man what played games. Seth, he said he was going out with Tessathon. He would. As the hours pass, Eunice feeling grew for the first time in a long while. Sloane felt something she wasn't used to feeling. Insecurity. By afternoon she tried toigne the anxiety and stick to her original plan. After all, she also had plans that night, a dinner with her co-worker who texted to confirm, and for a brief moment she thought about agreeing, but the idea of being with another man while Elliot was with another woman made her stomach turn. She put her phone at his end, went to the closet. She stood there, staring at the dresses hanging up, trying to decide what to wear. Normally that would have been easy, but that night nothing felt right. No outfit seemed good. Now that's when the truth hit her. She didn't want to go out, she wanted to be home. When IoT came back, she wanted to see what would happen when he walked through that door. Time kept ticking, and B7 in the evening. Elliot still hadn't shown any sign. He was changing his mind. He passed by the hallway wearing an neatly fitted shirt, his hair styled more carefully than usual. He grabbed his car keys, checked something on his phone, and left without hesitation. Sloane tried to seem indifferent. "You heading out now?" she asked. Keeping her voice. Talia paused for a moment and looked at her. Yeah. He didn't say anything else about when he'd be back or where he was going. He just opened the door and left. Sound of the lock clicking into place echoed through the apartment, and Sloane felt a chill run down her. Spinethy place felt bigger, emptier than usual. Silence, once just a subtle tension, felt deafening. She tried to phone open some social media apps, but she couldn't focus on anything. The clock's hand seemed frozen. 10 minutes. 15, 20, every second felt heavier. Then she grabbed her phone again and, almost without realizing, opened her chat with Elliot. The cursor blinked at her. She wanted to ask where he was. She wanted to know who he was with, but she couldn't. Thought would mean she'd lost, so she'd locked her phone and tossed it onto the couch, got up and went to the kitchen. A bottle of wine and poured herself. Glass, but even after a few sips, the uneasy feeling still burned inside her. She wanted Elliot to call. She wanted him to text her. Anything but. Head in minutes turned into hours. The apartment was so quiet she could hear her own breathing. She'd never felt like this before. Finally, around 11:30, she heard the sound of the lock turning. Chef Rose. Elliot walked in calmly, taking his keys out of his pocket and placing them on the table by the door. The hall lightly lit part of his face, but she couldn't. He was completely at ease. He didn't look like someone who'd had a tough night. If anything, he looked the opposite. Sloane got up slowly from the couch, trying to sound casual. "How was your night?" Elliot closed the door and slid his hands into his pockets. "It was good." The short answer made her stomach clench. She waited for more details, some kind of explanation, but he just headed her The bedroom, without another word, she stood there in the middle of the living room, feeling a knot in her throat forth. First time it really sunk in Shui isn't in control, and worse than that, maybe Shui's losing. Elliot, the next morning, Sloane woke before her alarm. The sun was barely up, but her eyes were already open, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange weight in her. Chess she couldn't stop her playing the night before. Elliot had come home late calmly with no explanation. He didn't ask why she hadn't gone out, didn't show curiosity, didn't even taunt her. He just came in and swayed her questions with a detached indifference, and went on with his life, and it was killing her. She rolled over, hoping to see Elliot asleep by her side, but his spot was empty. Her heart lurched. Got up quickly and went out of the bedroom. She found him in the kitchen, already dressed, a cup of coffee in hand, scrolling on his phone. It looked like a normal scene, but Sloane felt that nothing was normal anymore. "You're up early," Elliot looked up and regarded her for a second before answering. "I've got things to do today." His words hit her like a stone in the pit of her stomach. "Things to do?" Elliot had never spoken so vaguely. I'd always mentioned details about his day, talked about meetings or whatever was on his schedule, but now he just said things to do, and that was it. Sloane sat at the table, trying to seem unbothered, but she couldn't help asking, "Don't you want to talk about last night?" Elliot gave a short, cryptic smile. "Do you?" She opened her mouth to reply, but Stopage had no idea what to say. She wanted to ask how it went, if he really was with Tessa, if he enjoyed it, if something happened between them, but asking would mean admitting she cared, and she couldn't do that, so she looked away and picked up an apple from the fruit bowl, taking a bite she didn't really want. Elliot finished his coffee, grabbed his swallowed and keys, and headed for the doorway. Leaving now, he paused in their way, looking at her. "Yeah," she frowned. "It's still early." "I know." Hadn't offer anything else. No explanation, no promise he'd be back at his usual time. He just grabbed his caught upon the door and left. The sound off door closing echoed in the apartment, and Sloane felt her chest tighten. It wassail getting out of control, and the day stat followed. Life went on as usual, but with one terrifying difference for her. Elliot no longer seemed like the same man he used to show interest in what she was doing, ask about her day, get involved in conversations, even when he was tired. No, he just seemed to coexist alongside her. Sloane tried making small talk, tried to bring back the old normal, but his answers were cut monosyllable of feeling, and worst of all, didn't seem unhappy. That was the part that scared her the most. He wasn't cold and arrogant way. He didn't show anger, hurt, or any desire for revenge. There were no digs or orendias or little jabs, just indifference. He seemed genuinely fine, and that made a silent panic grow inside her. For the first time in their marriage, Ash realized she had no hold on him. Elliot wasn't begging for attention. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just living, and the more pulled away, the more Sloane felt like she was on the brink of losing something she never should have taken for granted. Sloane spent the whole day tensionable to focus on anything. Every few minutes she'd checked the time, and few it felt unbearable when the sun went down. Her anxiety peaked sitting on the couch, legs crossed, her fingers tapping nervously on the armrest. She tried to ignore the growing sense of dread. Then at last she heard the key in the lock. Her whole body tensed, her heart raced. She straightened up quickly, running a hand through her hair like she was preparing for a showdown. Elliot walked in calmly, like a nothing weighed on him, took off his coat and tossed his keys onto the console by door. The faint trace of his colleague need, the easy way he carried himself, made Sloane's stomach flip. "You left Elite," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Yeah." Sloane waited for him to add something else. Maybe mention where he'd been, or ask about Her day anything torso, he still cared, but he just took a sip of water and picked up his phone reading. A few messages, with a faint smile on his face, she felt a stab o' fanger. Who are you? With the question slipped out before she could stop it. Elliot finally looked at her. There was no sweetness in his eyes anymore, the irritation she'd expected. Just come we, does it matter? Those words hit her like a bomb. Why did it matter? Bekosh could no longer ignore it. Bekosh was feeling exactly what she'd wanted Elliot to feel when she first mentioned that dinner with her co-worker BKs for the first time. She wasn't the one calling the shots, but she told on say that, so she took a deep breath, fighting to keep her composure because we're married. Sheen's word trying to sound firm, though her voice shook a little. Elliot set his phone down on the counter and crossed his arms. Are we? A chill raced up Sloane's spine. What's that supposed to mean? Elliot leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on their table. It means I've spent the last few days thinking, and I realized you were right. Going out to dinner with someone else doesn't change anything, right? So if it really doesn't mean anything, maybe our marriage doesn't mean that much either. Her stomach dropped. Elliot he grabbed something from the counter and placed it gently on the table in front of her, a stack of papers. Sloane's heart pounded. Her eyes followed the text until she reached the title divorce agreement. She held her breath. A shock ran through her body like electricity. What her voice broke. I'd sell signed. I just need yours. Sloane felt their spin. This couldn't be happening. It just couldn't. She clutched the papers like she wanted to rip them up and Macathis. All go away. You can't. Bizarious. Elliot let out a humorless laugh. And you can't be surprised. A crushing silence fell between them. Sloane never thought it would end like Thestat, the man who'd always been there for her, who never gave up on her. Mariaju always tried to keep the peace, would be the first to leave. Fear climbed up her throat, but she swallowed it. She had to fix this. She had to make Elliot changed his mind. She took a deep breath, pushing the paper aside. Okay, I forgive you for going out with Tessa. We can forget about all this and start over. I laughed again, not with relief or humor, but a bitter edge. Yo forgive me, he repeated incredulous. She felt a knot tighten in her chest. Yes, if you forget what I said about going out with my co-worker, we can pretend none of this happened. Elliot's gaze hardened. He leaned in slightly, his voice firm and unwavering, and said the sentence that shattered Sloane completely. Don't need your forgiveness, she. Elliot grabbed his coat and picked up a suitcase that was already packed. Sloane jumped up and nicked. Wait, where are you going? Hey, you panned. The door moving on without another word. He walked out. The sky was already dark. When the door closed behind him, Sloane stayed there, staring at nothing, hearing only her own heart pounding in her ears. The apartment fell through, silent, empty, and at that moment, she understood that she'd never really been afraid of losing Elliot because of love. What really scared her was losing control over him, but now it no longer mattered, because it was already too late. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.